Hey everyone, this is your Ravens Voice host, Zealous here to drop some news about the upcoming release Armored Core Verdict Day on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Brand new highlights for this title include new story and missions, over 100 new parts including weapon arms and shields, a total of 56 maps to battle on, revamped parts with a renewed tuning and upgrading system, a setting for players to take in-game screenshots of all the action, a revamped conquest system now called World Mode, a system that will allow players and teams to earn special medals for their efforts, as well as a function for operators to control AI units. Verdict Day launches September 24th for the US and September 27th in Europe. Keep your bookmarks locked on facebook.com/armoredcore for more information and updates.
Hey everyone, welcome to the August 18th edition of Ravens Voice. This is your host, Zealous here. Tearsin is still in the process of relocating, so he's not going to be with us today, but instead we have asked for FromCheng to come stop by today and give us some of his notes on the coverage of the TEM1 Tournament of the European Master that just went down recently on PS3 side. So say hi to everybody, Cheng.
Heyo.
So we're really excited to cover this event, just to take a look at some of what was seen and just go over all the different variables. You know, I wasn't here for this one myself or to get a chance to watch it, but Cheng did. He was a spectator for the event, and I think he's going to have a lot of interesting points to mention on it. We're going to save most of our plugs for the end today. There will be some time markers for those of you who would like to visit specific points of the discussion. But remember, as always, you can visit our home over at Armored Core Legacy Forums in the ACL Media section. Again, there will be a link to the topic thread for the specific podcast in the description for those of you that want to follow it. So, in any case, I'd like to just jump right into things here. Again, we're looking at our TEM1 tournament. This is super fresh, hot off the press. You're literally just coming off this, aren't you, Cheng?
Yep. Barely like a day or so now.
Yeah, barely a day. And if I recall from my recollection, you were saying that even the videos are still being uploaded for this, right?
Yes, and actually the last one just uploaded right now. So all I got to do is, bunch them together and then they'll be out for everyone to enjoy.
Fantastic. So we'll be able to see those soon and check those out. I know there's a ton of footage here. We had looks like about 18 participants. This was a double elimination bracket. You can find information if you guys want to look into this on the bracket, the participants, and even the log at challenge.com/armoredcore tournament. Again, another link I'll be placing in the description for this podcast. But just looking over things, you can check out the win record and where everything went. Special mentions to our top three finishers, which I believe were Switchback as Supreme Champion, Worthy Adversary, our second finisher as Digdug King, and our third place, our maybe next time, Raven Mark III. So, full of results here. And again, there's a lot of things I'm on the dark here that I'd like for Cheng to help kind of fill in on. So, let's preface this one a second. This event, I believe, this is a first for the EU community, and in terms of putting something like this together and the general size of it. I mean, during your time as like a CM, Cheng, I mean, have you seen a similar event like this before? Or?
As far as I know, there haven't been any events or tournaments held for EU side at all, and there's a few reasons for this. First off, you have the region lock, so any North American event has to be separate from the EU event or the SEA event because, we can't get on the same server. In order to even do that, one side would have to buy copies of the other side's servers. And obviously most people aren't going to do that. That's really not worth the cost. And then there's also, the time zone issue. They're spread out over a large area. Europe is not one place. It's a bunch of small different countries, and leading on to that, that also means there's not really a similar language.
Right, right.
So communicating between all the different sections of the AC5 players is difficult, and I think that's also part of the reason why they don't really have um, like a forum where they all get together. I mean, there's a few players on the NA forums, like Armored Core Garage, Reaching Perfection, Mecha Networks, and we have a few on ACL as well.
Hmm.
But it's never really that many people. I know Fetty, Anark Fetty, he's a player on the EU side. He did make a forum of sorts, or like a pseudo chat, maybe would probably be a better way to put it.
Yeah, when did this crop up?
I'm not actually sure. All I know is that when I first got on the EU server, his team, I think it's called what's it called? It's called Tyrant something.
Hmm.
But they're on the map, and so as their emblem, they have basically the link to that. So I think when was this? Maybe 4 or 5 months ago, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's how I found out about it. But that place hasn't been used very often.
Gotcha. So, I mean, here you have this event. I mean, this is a real nexus point for more reasons than one. I mean, sure, you get spot for AC competition, but it looks like this was a meeting grounds that a lot of players hadn't had a chance to experience before. So, well, there had to be a lot out there. I mean, what were your feelings about the event as a whole, overall? When I say overall, too, not just enjoying the event itself, but were there any like technical issues you ran into? I mean, what was the queuing process like, as far as everyone getting ready to get connected and everything?
Well, overall, the event went pretty well, but we did have some issues at the start. For instance, like the first match or so, we had problems connecting. We couldn't get both the two referees and two players in the same room, and this little problem lasted for about an hour.
Ah,
Um,
yikes.
yeah, so it's a good thing we started a little bit early, just in case, and that was a good idea overall. But after that, I think it went pretty smoothly. The only big problem was we had a few no-shows, I think 4 or 5 people.
Mm.
And while that did make things go faster, it was a little bit annoying because they signed up for the tournament, they said they're coming, and they didn't come. And I made it clear to the EU community at the start, if this tournament failed, there would be no other tournaments for EU side because if this is the community I have right now, and let's say the case that Verdict Day doesn't work out, and this is going to be the same community I'm going to be dealing with, there's no chance that another tournament is going to succeed
Mm.
because it's like I can throw all the events that I care to do, giveaways, tournaments, exhibition events, and so on and so forth. But if the community doesn't care for it, if it doesn't come up and try to take part, win or lose or whatever,
Right.
it's not going to matter.
And that's critical. I think that's something we've pointed to, a few times ourselves. I mean, the initiative itself is only a part of the whole, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
great. It's great you have the platform. It's great. It's great that you can provide the grounds for it, but you got to get the community to come together and come behind something to really push it. And that's it's about anything that we do. For whereas that's a forum or online or anything else.
Yep. But despite the no shows and despite the few problems at the beginning, I think it went pretty well.
Good.
Everyone came in, they fought as long as they could. Some of them had to drop out early because of work and stuff. Because the tournament, let's see, the tournament started about 3 a.m. and it ran till
Wow.
about let's see, I'd say about 10:30 maybe. So that was about a good 7.5 hours. And some of them obviously had to do stuff in real life, work and stuff.
Right.
But
Right.
for the most part, everyone stayed, they fought, and even when they were the losers, they still fought and fought again. And I have to really give them credit for that.
That's what it's about. That's what it's about. I remember you were saying you were going to be getting ready for this. I was looking at the clock around the time, and I said, "Oh man, I hope he can make it through all right," because you were kind of hinting at this was going to be a bit of a marathon because of your time zone,
Yep.
compared to this. But
And the other thing too is that I actually screwed up the scheduling for this because it was actually supposed to be for Sunday, so because I had Sunday off, so on Saturday night I would get home from work
yeah,
and I could just stay up all night and then sleep in Sunday. But not knowing the time zones exactly correctly, um, I did it for Saturday morning. So as soon as the
Oh,
tournament done, I had to grab a nap or go to sleep for a little bit, and then I had to go to work, and then not be able to get home till almost 10 o'clock. So it was a bit tough.
I imagine that probably. I mean, did that really catch anybody off guard as far as those attending? I mean, they didn't have a problem making that little slight adjustment.
No, it was okay for them because on their end we did it pretty early. So 3 a.m. For here in the U.S. where I am, Mountain Standard Time, that's about let's see, that's about 11 a.m. over in Central Europe.
Okay.
Although the thing too is that how do I put this? Time zones are a little weird in Europe. Like for instance, the time zone I was going on was Central European time, but because it's summer, and I'm assuming because they don't have daylight savings, they're on what's called CEST, which is Central European summertime. And the other thing too is that although it says Central Europe, it apparently not a lot of people use CET.
Right, right, right.
So a good percentage of people didn't even know what time the event was actually happening, and they had to ask me quite a bit.
Oh man. But hey, I mean, they still got together. I mean, even with no shows included, that was 18 participants, right? And
Uh, yeah,
I
I
think
think
so.
so.
Yeah, yeah, right. I
Yeah.
mean, well, here's the other thing too. I know some tournaments have a different process of doing it. The bracket itself, once you got all the attendees together, was that something that you compiled then, or did you try to pre-screen a bracket according to who you thought was going to attend, or how did that work out?
No, actually, so the site you mentioned earlier where the bracket is,
Yeah.
challenge.com, it actually does it for you. You put the names in of your competitors,
Oh, I
and then
never
it just
used it.
randomly, yeah. That's I think that's the second time I used it. The first time was for um, I think it was the third tournament, and I ended up not using it at the last second. But it automatically uh, randomizes the competitors and puts them in brackets, so you don't have to do anything other than
That's
input the
useful.
name. Yep.
I'm sitting here laughing at the process we used to go through at LAN events for this. You'd have all kinds
Yeah.
of crazy ways to try to mix up who was going to play who, and keeping on a big poster board or chart what the brackets were, making them on the spot. It's then you have something simple as this. So
Yeah.
really makes me wish that could have been put to use back then. But man, so but yeah, I mean it presents everything well. You can see we talked about this a bit earlier, but you can see everything from all the full results down to who tied for what place and brackets and wins. So pretty self-explanatory stuff. So let's focus on the players for a minute here. I'm looking at the attendee list, and there's a couple of names I'm familiar with besides our first, second, and third finishers. I see Oblivion Doll had a chance to enter. I'd see him posting over at ACL a lot. Um,
Yep.
from what you're saying here, Chang, it sounds like it was pretty busy. Even down to getting things connected. I mean, did you have a whole lot of time to kind of just hang out and just talk with people, whether it's during the tournament, before the tournament, afterward? Did you get any of that in, or was it all business?
No, I mean we still had plenty of time to talk and do stuff. Because at the start of the tournament, I created a chat room on the PSN.
Hmm.
Basically, I brought all the players in. And during that whole time, people were just talking, like, hey, what's going on? Who's winning? Is it my turn? Stuff like that. And
Okay.
then we also had the AC5 Skype chat as well for some people who couldn't be on just at that moment. Like, if when they needed to be on, we'd call them and then they'd come in.
Hmm.
And overall, I think it was pretty good. I mean, we did get to chat quite a bit. Me, not so much because
Right.
I was refereeing. But during some of the lulls, like when we took a break, we had a chance to talk. It was pretty cool because I actually know most of these guys, like Switch, Stedrick, Helmasa.
Right.
I know most of them because I've either played. They were the people I played with first on the EU side, or they're also on the JP side.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So you kind of had a chance to convene there. Yeah. The other thing within this, you're mentioning the breaks you guys took. How many breaks did you have throughout this whole event? I mean, did you just have a couple of like major ones, or how did you base those? Were they preset, or?
Well, we only had two breaks, about 10 minutes long each. One because I had to use the
Okay.
restroom, and the other one because I had to, eat for a little bit.
Right, right, right. So obviously people are on different time schedules for that as is. So no, it's great that went over smooth.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, especially considering, people over a large area,
yeah,
as large as that one.
yeah. I mean, major props. Good stuff. Um, Another thing I'm looking at here about this event. This goes a little off topic to what we were saying, but there was some talk about the ban list here for this one. And I know we mentioned this before. The fact that there was a ban for all ultimate weapons. Is that right?
Yep.
And that there was an automatic forfeit. Did anyone end up, mentioning that, or did anyone raise any points about it, or did that all just kind of go over?
Not really. No one really complained or anything. It was like they noted it, and that was about it. So I guess it wasn't that big of an issue with anyone.
Well, this is such an interesting one. We've had a lot of chats about over weapons, and this is one of the only spots I know that I've seen over weapons take a specific ban within a pocket community, and even if it's a localized tournament like this. Just for the sake of contrast, though, I was wondering, what were some of your thoughts on over weapons based off of what you've encountered on NA side?
Well, at this point, there's not that many. On NA side alone,
Right.
it's very rare for me to ever come across one or two. The last time I saw a dedicated UW user was Drake Stones, and that was the last time I played with him was back in 1.01. And basically, he was just a grind blader slash kicker, a pure grinder, basically. But he dropped out of the game, I think, in 1.03
Okay.
or maybe 1.04 because he's got pretty bad connection, you
Okay.
know. So it's
Yeah.
basically when he's on the AC5, it turns yellow. I forgot what connection type that is, but basically, it means he can't connect to a lot of people or he's going to get dropped a lot. And basically, I guess he got fed up with that and decided, it was easier on himself, on everyone else if, he stepped away from the game because of that.
Mm,
Kind of sad, but, it is what it is.
yes.
Um, let's see. On JP's side, it's actually, I see it quite frequently. In both Conquest and Free Battle, you've got your dedicated users.
Hmm.
Normally, they're kickers, and they use whatever UW. I've seen Giga Missile, Grind Blade, Mass Blade,
Hmm.
uh, Giga Cannon, some Legion Pulses, but mainly Legion Pulses. You see that in Conquest, and they're
Makes
just
sense.
dedicated Legion Pulse users. Use it one time, and then you use it like a regular build.
There was another neat caveat, kind of like a twist in this event. I remember reading about a stipulation that you have to kill your opponent, right? That there can't be any AP leads. Okay, we've seen a lot of matches, and all kinds of contests, over especially the AC tournament history, where some things come down to that last rifle shot or that last shred of AP that's left, and someone has an advantage. How did that go over? I mean, there's this note about a double DQ, I believe. I mean, did that work out okay? I mean, were all the matches pretty clean kills? Do you have any strange repeats or?
Interestingly enough, we never had an issue with that. I mean, it
Huh.
was clean across the board. Usually, most people die in a couple of minutes, but I think part of it came from what happened during the last NA tournament that got canceled, which I was running,
Mm,
and they basically didn't want a repeat of that.
fair enough. Everyone wanted the wins and the matches to be pretty decisive, pretty on point,
Yeah.
and just leave it at that. So,
A quick note about that, though. I think that the dynamic of not having AP lead turned out to be rather interesting
mm,
because it did change somewhat how people played. They were pretty much straightforward, and when there were lulls in combat, it was more like a minute to step back and think, what do I need to do next? Because most they didn't have to worry about AP lead. They could
mm,
just focus more on doing an actual strategy.
there you go. There you go. It's a common thing. Whether it's conquest or like a battle royale breakdown to try to hold an edge. You see this a lot. In fact, especially in battle royale, you'll hear that about where's the guy who still has 42K. But
Yep.
that with that not being a factor, that's really interesting. So let's check out some of the pool play here too. I'm looking at the start of this bracket and as it kind of disperses into the rest of the tournament. One of the first things I notice here that's pretty stark is just the amount of 2-0s you have here. There are very few 2-1s. Even at play in terms of wins, most things we have here are sweeps. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that at the start? Like, what were some factors for it, or just?
I think for some of them, I know some of the starting ones, it's because of, well, first off, obviously, some of them are due to people being no-shows.
Mhm.
But the other part is just a case of bad matchup. Some of the newer players are being pitted against some of the vets,
Right.
and, they're getting demolished. And then as you go further on, um, it's probably a case of build choice,
Yeah.
not having the right build or, incorrectly predicting what your opponent is going to bring and
Mm.
then trying to bring something to, have a chance against that. And then as you go on, um, most of the matches start to become, as you see, 2-1s, so uh, it was tie and then someone obviously won and then advanced forward.
Yeah. Narrows
And
down.
these are, I guess, some of the better players, so to speak, not universally across the board, because I know in some cases it was just a bad AC choice that screwed them over.
Right.
But these were also some of the best matches in the, of the videos I watched and
Very
watching
cool.
through, reviewing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. As you checked out some of the footage, it kind of makes me think of how you talk about this idea of predicting builds and how that can play against you sometimes. There's when we look at competitive fighting games, it's not like I've been to an Evo ever or anything, but I naturally think of Evo because that's the immediate spot where this factor kind of pops up. You have certain matchups against certain characters where there's strengths and weaknesses, but sometimes players are able to take that weakness and adapt to it in a sense and
Yeah.
still bring their own spin to it. With AC5, you got a slightly different dynamic working there.
Yeah, you have to be especially careful with this because one bad choice and it's going to screw you over completely, especially if you're trying to hard counter.
Mm,
I think this is part of the reason why the earlier NA tournaments were always uh, you know, locked builds. So you could only choose one build
right.
and you have to stick with it. So you have to be very careful on your weapon choices and you know on your frame because you wanted as few bad matchups as possible because chances are sooner or later in that tournament you're going to run into someone like that.
Yeah.
And in this case, we kind of just let them go, hey, you know what, use whatever you want. And so the dynamic of picking and counter picking, based on how many times you've won so far and
Hmm.
what your opponent has brought or what you think they're going to bring, from knowing them or having played them before, did play a part in this tournament.
Wow. And it's just, that going along with the time limit and the kill stipulation too. I really imagine it probably made people get in try and get straight to their plan and know what they were doing with that or to map that out. Um, Specifically though with the time, I'm wondering about the timing of the events. Like obviously you're going to go longer when you have 2-1s and everything, and we had clean kills, obviously plenty of those. But do you feel in either set, I guess, like whether the beginning of the pools, going into quarterfinals, semifinals, that you just had longer matches in general, longer sets, or was it kind of about the same pace? Did it kind of just keep an equilibrium?
Well, at the start, it was pretty quick and straightforward. Most matches lasted, I would say, 2 minutes tops, an
Right.
average of 1 minute to 1 minute 30.
Hmm.
And then as time went on and, the better players were left, it started to get a little bit longer because, they would fight for a little bit and they would break off,
Hmm.
think about it for a moment and then start up again. And so as they were thinking more about how they were going to do it, and so that took longer. And then
Right.
obviously, they went the full 3 matches
Right.
because it wasn't always a straightforward win for them.
Now, real quick, I could have just missed this because I'm blind here. But what was the specific time limit? What was that set to?
It was 10 minutes. It
10
was
minutes.
originally
Okay.
5, but then after we put the stimulation, you must kill your opponent or you're both DQ'd. We go for 10.
Okay.
Just in case. We were a little bit concerned
Yeah.
about that change because it's double elimination, and so you have to do the winners bracket and then you have to do the losers one as well. So
Right.
it's double the matches. I mean, I have 54 videos from that entire
Oh
tournament,
man.
but thankfully, it never got to that point. I don't think anyone ever ran the full 10 minutes. At most, 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, that's about sensible. I mean, like you're saying, the change to 10 does bring room for potentially really, really lengthy matches. Most of the settings I know I've seen revolve around about the 5 window or so, just to make sure people, are active and getting engaged about things. But yeah, it sounds like it worked out in this context. So hey, major props. Now,
Yeah.
now, like you said, you spectated this and you had a chance to watch all these matches too. But I want to also put this out there. This is important. South Q really did a lot to help host this. Now, was it you and South Q alone that worked on this, or did you have a larger team for it? Or
It was just me and South Q. Originally, I thought I was gonna, have to run this whole thing by myself, but thankfully he came forward and basically said, "Hey, you need help," and so I had him be the second referee,
that's
and I'm really
awesome.
thankful for that. Yeah, because running these tournaments are tough, especially when you're by yourself. I mean, that's basically how I ran the first two tournaments, and they weren't too bad just because there weren't a lot of people. But when the third tournament came around, and there was 14 teams. That's about
Right,
yeah, that got really tough. That's about 52 people, more or less.
man.
Yeah, so major props to him. He came forward, he supported his server, and he basically gave a helping hand. I know a lot of times I have to ask people like, "Hey, you want to help? Hey, you want to help?" It's like, no, no. And in the past, I had to rely on a few of my teammates, and because no one wanted to help. I mean, there were some cases where people said they would and they didn't show up,
Right,
and even if they didn't show up, I'm thankful for the fact that they came forward first and said, "Hey, if I have time, I can help you if you need it." But
right.
I, when I originally did this tournament, I wasn't expecting much because smaller number of people,
Hmm.
and you want as many people as possible to be in the tournament.
I just want to jump right into some of the parts, maybe some like the designs that we saw and that were used in this event. Cheng, just what did you run across just as a spectator in this event?
During this tournament, I actually saw a lot of very similar builds, a lot of common builds. There were three in particular that stood out. There were the TE midweights, the super heavy, and the fortress quads. Usually, a lot of designs focused around those three. Just to explain real quick, a TE midweight is basically a midweight that has TE parts, usually two or more, sometimes just one. A TE core is enough to bump them up into that category. And then we have the super heavy, which is basically a midweight, a heavyweight that has good defenses in two areas or three areas, depending on their builds. Usually, what I saw in this tournament, it was Roland, Jotun, Elbay, which is a CE arm, and either KT3 and 4 or Barguzin. And then the third build I saw most frequently is the Fortress Quad, and this is basically like a quad with really high defenses in all areas. The most common one I saw was the Chromai, Jotun, Animus, and Viso, which is a fairly common Fortress quad design.
Fantastic. So we've got there's a whole mouthful to cover there. I just want to jump back a moment real quick. Let's just walk through some of these and look at them. We have our super heavyweight frame that you mentioned, and this variation between the KT3N4 and the Bargusan. Did you see these legs used pretty interchangeably, or was one used more than the other?
I actually can't remember off the top of my head. I think they were both used a fair amount of times. Most
Okay.
people use the key T3 and 4 because it's more balanced. It's got good mobility for that type of leg, heavyweight. And then people were using Barguzin for its defense because it's got slightly better CE.
Right.
So with the KT3 and 4, you're still vulnerable to UBRs sometimes. Actually, let's see. I think when people used KT3 and 4, they tended to use heads other than the roll-in. Sometimes they did,
Right.
sometimes they didn't. But with the Barguzin, you pretty much buff out UBRs, which are a real killer for heavyweights.
Mhm.
If they can nail you with that, because most people go dual UBRs and they fire really fast.
Neat. See, and it's neat hearing about this. these are some legs that I could say I followed, but I've never really jumped into in depth on these, and I know there's probably some other listeners have some curiosity about these too. Yeah, it's great. I think that marks a good segue to another point I wanted to mention about the loadouts, or actually more like a question I had to mention about it. If you could, if you recall a player that made use of the super heavyweight specifically, what were the types of loadouts you were seeing come out in these designs? A combination of shoulders, left arm, right arm, hanger, or a very set specific combo? Just some of the things you saw.
Okay, so right off the top of my head, the person I remember using the heavyweight, the super heavyweight, was a Daedric King. He was a second place winner. He was the one who was using the Barguson lead, so he was going for defense. Interesting note about that, he was also using the UBT 25H, which is a high excel booster. And most people, when you choose the heavier legs, from like, I guess you could still use it with the KT3 and 4, but when you use it with the heavier legs, most people tend to go for high power, and that was interesting.
Right.
Anyway, he was using dual battle rifles, and his back was I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was Oxeye PMG. So basically,
Okay.
when he came up against TE midweights or certain TE midweights, he could stagger them with the Oxeye and do they can do effective damage with the PMG, but depending on the TE midweight.
Speaking of TE midweights, again, this is another frame that we touched on coming into this segment. Okay, just the general setups they normally have. Obviously, severe arms for plenty of firing stab. Um, as far as the loadouts that you saw present on these designs, would you say that they stuck pretty much to a similar formula that these designs have always followed, or did you see something completely out of the bag here?
For the most part, they followed the similar formula. Any head, TE core, sphere arms, and then the ULG 21 legs.
Yep.
Interesting because I know most people on the NA side have kind of moved away from that, and in 1.05 they get the pretty much the final nerf. Although they're still used in ranked on that side. But in terms of weapons, it was mainly it followed the common route. It was dual BRs and either Lamport Oxeye or Oxeye PMGs. There was a few different ones like trying to remember. There was plasma gun shotgun. There were some shotguns, and I think that was it. I know a few of them in the shoulders used either missiles, CIWS, or I think a few people used auto attack guns as well.
Oh, wow. So some of the shotties, probably to a lesser extent, the auto attack guns because they don't have a massive, massive stun force at all.
Mainly, well, because with the shotgun, you're going mainly for the, stun it does anyway. But yeah, it did play a big part. Switchback, who was, first place, he used dual shotguns, USG 11Hs. And he was using with subcomputer so that they locked instantaneously and to ensure a shot. And in his matches against Daedric in the winners final, that pretty much is what got Daedric killed because he was stunning him and he was preventing him from moving, and he would always circle around him or to the side. So when when Daedric was trying to turn and look at him, he kept getting stunned because he kept getting shot at, and eventually got him killed.
See, that's it's one of the amazing dynamics about AC5. I think we've steadily seen the importance of stability rise as AC has come along as a series, but the extent that we see it in 5, it plays such a massive role in your entire game, especially if you break down the different categories of stability. So many of the advents we've had in 5, that's just such a huge factor. So to see heads lean that direction, especially once TE heads got their fix to have better stability on the patches, I know that changed a lot too.
Yep.
But yeah, going off of that for just a moment, I want to take a focus back on Diedrich, our second place finisher. We've had a couple of notes here about some of the things that he put into play and used, but I'd like to hear just a little bit more about just his design choice for this event. What really got him through?
Well, he used some of he pretty much used, I think, the that we already stated of the three most commonly used builds. He used TE midweight, super heavy, and fortress quad. And I know at sometimes he did mirror other people's builds. I think it was against Raven in the losers final. Raven was using a light tank. I'm pretty sure it was the Baikal legs with a cannon autocannon. And in the second match, Digdug was using the same build, except in the shoulders he had a subcomputer instead of. I think Raven was using either rockets or missiles, but I don't remember for sure. But yeah, and he was using some interesting variations. I mean, with his TE midweight, he was using the ULG 09/A legs, which are basically they look kind of like the lightweight legs, and they have very, very good jumping ability. They've got about 3,600, and I think that's the third highest of all the legs. And his heavyweight was using the Barguzin leg, so he was going for defense. And as I mentioned earlier, he was also using the UBT 25H, which is an interesting choice for a heavyweight, especially if you're using Barguzin, because Barguzin is the first generation KT3 and 4, and it doesn't have the same stability computation, so it's quite a bit slower.
Right. It's funny. It's the very part I totally butchered the spelling on earlier. I think when I mentioned that, but yeah, we're talking about some of the subtle variations that came up in these different builds that were put into play. I wonder, especially as someone that has not played on EU side. I don't have any experience with that. I kind of wonder if the process of I guess evolution or discovery with some of these designs was a similar one that was followed like in the NA servers and whatnot as well, or was it a different way to I guess arrive at a similar point?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it's really divergent evolution. I would mostly say they kind of went through the same progress as we did, although it was probably kind of a bit slower because there was less people on the EU side,
Yeah.
and there were also less of the more skilled players for a time, because obviously less people. But I do think they went around the same path, and I think it was kind of the forums and everything like that that really helped a bit more, so that information spread around a lot more easily than say in the past.
Makes sense. Hey, if there's any EU players out there that are checking this out, and you have some commentary on how you felt just with matchmaking over your time in AC5, how easy was it to find matches? Was it something really difficult, or were some of the people in the NA side were we complaining for no reason, or whatever take that you have about it? We'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line, or feel free to post about it. So, well, good deal. I mean, we covered, a couple of the top finishes there. There's also Raven Mark III. Now, I haven't heard a whole lot about some of the things he put into play. Maybe you could throw some light on that.
Raven Mark III. Okay, so he was pretty similar as well. I guess you could say for really some of the top players, they use sort of the same builds. Although in Raven's case, instead of using a heavyweight, because I think he used that only like a few times, he used a tank. And it was, let's see if I can remember the build. It was Roland, Jotun, Elbay, Baikal. It was Kalabase autocannon and KO-9K2 cannon, and then VTF missiles in the shoulder. And I think
the build.
yeah. Well, because it's also pretty similar to mine, because I normally use light tanks a lot. But anyway, I think the tank in particular got him through a lot of the tough situations, because I know a good percentage of his matches with the tank were very close. His against Telemasa, I think he ended up with, because Telemasa was using Fortress Squad, he ended up with, I think, 6K left. And
Oh, man.
And then him against, I don't know, I think it was Daedric, but I don't remember for sure. But basically it was whoever it was against, he was using his tank, the opponent was using a sniper. And basically he got a win in the last second. His opponent took a shot at him with a sniper rifle, left him with 59 AP, and he nailed him with his missile.
Holy crap.
Yeah. We thought it was over as soon as he got shot, but 59 AP and he wins.
Wow. Wow, that's clutch. You don't get those as much anymore. At least to that degree. Sheesh. I'm looking at the bracket here too, as Hellamasa's advanced. Just some of the people he ran into,
Hmm.
and it's pretty slick that this is one of the users we had of the Fortress Squad. And you mentioned tanks popping up here and there, but was was Hellamasa one of the few using a Fortress Squad here? Or how prevalent was that compared to the RT midweight and the other that we mentioned?
The Fortress Quad wasn't used quite as much,
Okay.
but I think it was used quite a bit on specific maps like Abandoned City and what was the other one? Abandoned City, and there was one Marine Facility.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's because
Floating
you
for
could
good
get on the
reason
top
there.
tower. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it wasn't used quite as much. But when it was pretty effective, especially if they knew how to use it. And I know Hellamasa did.
Very cool, very cool. There's a reason I'm kind of coming around to this one last. Whenever I hear about the Fortress Squad, it always puts a big smile on my face. I think Cheng, you were the one to mention a long while back about quads being something like akin to attack helicopters.
Yeah, pretty much. They
Yeah,
float above you. It's like a hind, you know.
pretty
It's
much.
heavily armored, relatively, quote, relatively fast, and
Right.
you can deal a lot of punishment.
Oh yeah, I know. This is something that I know I mess with a lot myself. Um, I guess one thing I'm curious about is the loadout on these. I mean, as far as for shoulders, I'm hearing a lot about subs being used for good reason. But what about a loadout of like Mathura CE missiles? Any vertical missiles or anything like that used to kind of help?
Yes, actually, it was CE missiles, Mathuras, that were used the most, I think.
Mathura figures.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's a pretty beefy onslaught you can put on. And again, I always love seeing this one at play. Most of these use I think you mentioned I talked about it earlier about the VISO legs. A
Yes.
lot of these put those legs to use. So many great points in those. It's got the highest AP out of all the quad legs out there. You got great like loading cap. You got good attitude control and whatnot, and they just sync really well with the Jotun and everything else, and
Yeah.
solid
And
beefcakes.
yeah, it's pretty much, I think it's for heavy quad legs, they're pretty much the best one because they got good overall stats. And when you combine that with all the other parts, they are a pain to deal with. This is specifically for me because my loadouts tend not to really be able to handle HRJs and quads well.
Right.
And speaking of quads, I have to take it back. It was the Viso. Viso is slow, but there was another quad leg that used that. I don't
Gonna
remember.
throw one out in the park here. Ortigara by chance?
Yes, it was Ortigara. So it's technically a light leg because of its weight,
Hmm.
although it maybe fit more into mid. But you could make that work as well, and it would be quite a bit faster for loss in some defense.
Totally, totally. Another huge favorite. It kind of reminds me of a old school Knot, or like later Lizard.
Yep.
Where we had that mix of decent capacity but speed and armor. It's such a great spot. Such a great spot to be with those. I know we're not going to delve into the full specifics about it here because we're just looking at what was utilized and what we saw. But if anyone's interested in actually seeing some of the specific part selections here, kind of how to play these, Digdug had a really good tutorial in this. I remember going over before, so I'm gonna be sure to post a link for that in the description if anybody wants to check that out. So, well, and on that note, I believe we will close things out here. So, Cheng, I want to say thanks so much for coming on, just to talking about some of your experiences. A big shout out to South Q for helping host this event. Everybody who attended, everybody in the list, thanks for really helping push the EU community, most importantly the EU tournament community too, and ensuring that this is something that's going to continue to go forward. So I have a few quick plugs. We still have the Deemer versus Griffin music video competition. Obviously, the videos are not they're not completed yet. They are not fully posted, but just keep an eye out on the threads that we specified and that we've pointed out. I'll be sure to place a link for that if people would like to see it. Again, that's on ACU ACL, about every major outlet, so you'll be sure to catch that. Also, don't forget there is a Verdict Day giveaway still happening over at ACL. Again, that was for postings, for post counters' sake. And Cheng, did you just want to mention just a little bit about that? 'Cause I think it's usually me and Tearsin that talk about it, but
Yeah, so basically, guys, this event is just to celebrate Verdict Day coming around the corner and, getting a new AC game. And we want something to get the community excited. So we're doing this giveaway. Basically, what you have to do is you have to log in and register. Well, you have to register on the ACL forums and basically just actively post. And after a certain number of posts, you'll be entered into the giveaway. We're not going to say what number, only that the number is less than 20. And anyone can enter. Doesn't matter location. If you're in Europe, America, Canada, China, wherever, I'll send it to you wherever you are.
awesome.
Yeah. And the only other rule is staff may not participate. So sorry, Zealous.
But
And only one account, and one per person. So if you multi-account, we're going to ban you and remove you from, the giveaway. So don't do that. It's not worth it. Just one account. That's it.
there you have it. As a last note here, we should be getting back on schedule next week. I believe Tearsin will have things reoriented on his end, so we should be okay on that. Stay tuned for the upcoming topics and what we'll be discussing. Once again, any questions, thoughts, comments, anything in between, feel free to email us at RavensVoiceACL@gmail.com, or be sure to visit our dedicated forum over on ACL. Once more, there will be a link to this thread that we've talked about today, but you can comment on any others there in any other spots you've seen for discussion. So thank you again, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned, and we will catch you next week.